Welcome to Rebound and Assist, a a YouTube channel focused on the NBA videos. My name is Justin. I'm going to start a new video series today. That's called the NBA 75 Ultimate Fantasy Bracket. Obviously, everybody knows that the NBA, in celebration of their 75th anniversary, has issued a list of 75 bracket 76. We're going to share a little bit more later. A greatest player list out there, voted by medias, ex players, ex coaches. We've got this list. Everybody is discussing the list and also the snub, celebrating the greatness of this league and of this basketball game. But in this video series, we're going to do something very unique. That is to put these 75, 76 players into an ultimate fantasy bracket of 16 teams. So it's going to be something that involves two main phases. One is to draft 5 rounds of players, draft 5 rounds, 15 teams of 5-man lineup, meaning the 75 players will be separated into 15 teams. So it's going to be a drafted in a snake method. In other words, the 15th team will have the 16th pick, and then the 14th team would have the 17th pick, and so on. It will be a snake format so that everybody get a crack at a higher draft in a different round. And I've already mentioned that there's 76 players because, very interestingly, in the vote there is an equal vote at the end. So there are actually 76 players in the best 75 players list. So what do we do with the 17-6 guy? Don't worry too much. Don't worry. The 16th team will have the 76 player in this draft. And out of all the snubs you see online, out of the Tony Parker, Pau Gasol, Tracy McGrady, this 16th team can draft any 4 players to fit into that particular team. So what will happen after the 16th team? That move on to the second phase of this video series. All these 16 teams will play an imaginary 7-game series bracket to determine the ultimate champion. And you can vote online. You can comment which team you like the most. Now, one thing that is quite tricky. Obviously, the league has evolved a lot in these 75 years, especially the rules. And people say, hey, what about the old guys can't play in the new rules game, or the new guys can't play in the old rules game. So to make it fair, we're gonna do something called, in the first half of each game, of this imaginary game, in the first half you play in the old rules, second half you play in the new rules. I didn't define it very strictly. It's already imaginary and fantasy anyway, so don't worry too much. But you understand the concept that it's more physical in back in the days, and it's more skill in these recent days. And I want to have a mixture of that in the rule book. So when I draft the players, each team would have that mindset of what type of style do I want to play? Do I want to have a mixed style to fit in both rules? Or do I want to focus on the new or focus on the old? So we'll get to that. But that's really the entire video series that I'm very excited to create here. Now, just to make a qualifier before we get started on the first round draft, very important note is I started watching the NBA 1996. So all the pre-1996 things I've read, I've watched videos and clips, they're not like a kind of first-hand thing. So it's all a lot of media filters and whatnot. And obviously, the older it gets, like the 60s, the 70s, I know very little about. But I've done some homework on Basketball Reference, on a lot of videos, and tried to compile the best and the most sensible drafts for this ultimate fantasy bracket. So here we go. We're marching into the draft. So we'll get started with the draft. The first round is really to find, for each 15 teams, like franchise cornerstone, the guys that you can build around. So round 1, first pick, no brainer. Let's go with Michael Jordan. I don't think I need to explain too much about this pick at all. But to give you some context, he obviously won 6 rings, go 6 for 6 in the finals, but really Michael Jordan was dominant the moment he joined the league. In the 1984 to the 1980s, he was dominant even in the 80s. Even though his team didn't get to the finals slash didn't win a championship back then, he was so good that even Magic or Larry, guys that dominated in the 80s, would fear Michael Jordan, like his performance in the Boston Garden. So it doesn't really need a lot of explanation. He also obviously lifted this league to a completely different level. So Michael Jordan, round one, pick one. Easy. Second pick, we're here to talk about culture and franchise and how to make sure you have the best chance to win in 4 rounds of playoff series. Going with the best ultimate winner in this league has ever seen. Won so many championships that you lose count easily. Going with Bill Russell. He can kind of play the modern game as well. Really, really dominant inside, passing, skilled, rebound. He knows so much about the game. And by the mere fact that he's still so influential in this league and also in Boston in particular, you can know that this guy is a inborn leader. And it's easy. As we go along in this round one, there's so many very high talented players, but leadership qualities and the ability to lift others is something that Bill Russell really, really is good at. And so as the guy coming at number three, going with a very young guy, going with LeBron James. I think the most impressive statistics is the number of consecutive finals appearances for LeBron James, meaning how dominant in his days in Cleveland, Miami, then back to Cleveland. For that span, 8, 9 year span, he was so good every single year. The East wasn't particularly impressive, but still, you have to be so consistent to be going back and back and back and back and back and back and back to the NBA Finals. So LeBron James as the number three pick. The fourth pick, again, another really good leader in franchise categories, will be Magic Johnson as the leader in the 1980s Lakers, Showtime Lakers, one of the players that changes the league. From a franchise perspective, Lakers become another glorious decade, but also from just a people drawn to this league, him and Larry Bird, which will come later, a little bit later in this round, changed the culture of this league. And he also bring joy and fun and a certain class to the Lakers and the way to play the point guard position. So he's going to be a matchup nightmare for a lot of these teams when we really roll out that fantasy bracket. The fifth pick, we're going with his teammate. We're going with Kareem, center for the Lakers in the 80s and in the 70s, Milwaukee Bucks center. Think for Kareem, obviously, as the number one ultimate scorer in the history of the NBA. His consistency, 20 plus years in the league, and can really score a lot of ways in the middle. I mean, if you can score that many points, that many ways for 20 years, you're really good. You don't care about old rules or new rules. You're going to dominate. So, Kareem at the number five pick. Number six pick, and this is where I start to get controversial here. Go with a guy that I know is consistent winning culture that's going to as I look at the draft, the pool of 75 players, there's so many really good scorers that I think I don't necessarily need a scorer right away in pick one. I want to have an all-around dominant force. Going with Tim Duncan at number six. He's good. Tim Duncan, without a shadow of a doubt, he dominated again for 20 years in the middle, kind of like Kareem, but he dominated in a even more subtle way on a rebound defensive mindset, and also obviously his bank shot. And people forget how good offensively he was in his first 10 years of the league. You can't guard Tim Duncan. The Mavs back when Dirk Nowitzki is in town, early in his career, the Suns, all these teams, even Shaq, when they face Tim Duncan, it's got a nightmare matchup. So Tim Duncan going with number six. Kind of take a different turn in team number seven. My imaginary GM started to scream like, "No, I don't care about stability of leadership. I just care about talent." So pick number seven is all about talent and the domination that this guy has shown is Mr. Wilt Chamberlain. 100 points obviously is an amazing statistics in a game, but really 50 points in average in one season is unbelievable. I mean, James Harden or Kobe Bryant can try to sniff around a 35 points per game mark, but to average 50 in a game, in the old rules, granted. But take note that we're going to play half the games in the old rule. So Wilt is going to be just fine. He's going to dominate. He's so big, and so is this number 8 pick that we got here. Shaquille O'Neal goes at number 8. Again, from a dominance perspective and also from a competitive perspective, you recognize in this list there's so many really good centers that you'll want to kind of pick a high level center ASAP. So Shaq is here. He dominated for at least a decade and a half from when he joined the league all the way when he joined Miami and kind of played really well as well in Phoenix. Um, so Shaquille O'Neal, that Lakers three-peat in the middle of the 2000s that just come off Michael Jordan a little bit. So those were the years that Shaq really carried himself to a really high level. Um, his teammate come around at number 9, Kobe Bean Bryant, the late great Kobe Bryant. His mid-range and his skill level on an offensive and defensive standpoint was amazing, and his ultimate fundamental, and he is really competitive as well. I mean, these things stand out, and his drive was the real force that his teammates can really ride on it. That's something that you can't say for all the leaders, but you can sense his fears and you just pour on it. So it's easy to go for him. The 10th pick, it's Larry Bird. I think the reason why I go for Larry here is he's obviously kind of from the old rules games, but also from a new rule perspective, is such a good shooter. A lot of his statistics were kind of deflated in the sense that it's the three pointer aren't as dominant back then. Actually, in the 80s, per game, a team only shoot about 5 threes. Imagine that. Nowadays, a lot of players average 5 threes in a game, one guy, and a team can easily average 33 pointers in a game. Imagine Larry Bird can have that many more shots, and he's a 3-time 3-point champion in the All Star weekend, and he's basically granted as one of the best shooters to league history. Just that he doesn't have enough attempts. So he's long, he's big, and he's so skilled that he can basically play both era really, really well. Go down to 11, which I still think from a legacy perspective is an easy pick, Oscar Robertson, the triple double machine. And he is, again, really so polished in a lot of ways. His offensive skill set, his passing skill set. Obviously, he's a 60s guy. I don't know as much, but still, all around, so many legends have speak so highly about Oscar. And he comes in at 11, which I still think is a relatively easy pick. But come to team number 12, this is where I stopped my list a little bit because I felt like this is where I started to feel it's not as easy to pick. These guys coming in 12, 13, 14, 15 can easily fall into round 2. But I'm going with a new young bleed here, still playing active and scoring like a crazy, going with Stephen Curry. His whole career with Golden State, he changed the game legitimately. I just mentioned about shooting threes in a Larry Bird little segment. Steph Curry proved that you can win championship by shooting a very high level and high volume three pointers because you stretch the floor that way. If you're skilled enough to shoot it from outside, and Steph is also very skilled to shoot it off the ball, and he's also very skilled off the dribble. That you can't just always close him out and clown him. Remember early in his career, people would be like, "Yeah, close him out. Don't let him shoot threes." Then he's so skilled on his dribble game. I think one of the most impressive games I've watched was his domination before he even win championship, but his run against San Antonio Spurs in the second round series when he was so good both shooting and driving that you can't stop both. If you close him out, he's just going to go past you and you just floater, going to go and lay up. He's one of the really best skilled player, and with his shooting is unbelievable. So, and he's obviously from all accounts a great leader, a great friend, and again a great culture setter. That's why he's 12, and that's why this guy is 13. Kevin Durant goes at number 13. I think a lot of people would probably put him over Curry just because of his size and his defense. But when I build franchise, I want to have a guy that I know I can trust to be like the core guy, crux guy that I can make sure everybody's happy around. So I put Curry above, but Durant has his strength, no doubt, because you can pass him the ball at the top of the key and just get out of the way. And it's hard to defend Kevin Durant. He's probably the most skilled 6'11", 7-foot guy ever in this league with a handle. So, Kevin Durant at 13. At 14, the logo of the NBA, Jerry West. Beautiful scorer. I mean, looking back at his stats, so many 25 points per game plus season for Jerry West. He's a people known him as Mr. Clutch and the logo, and people known him as shooting the ball from half court, which counts as a two back then. But really, his dominance by just scoring the ball easy, pull up mid range, long range, and drives. Jerry West had it all. And if you look at his statistics, his stand out. So in what we can judge as youngsters, his influence now as GM, presidents, or how operate and run teams and recruit players, that kind of reflects something either in his mind, which how smart he is, or his charisma, his leadership on and off the court is shown easily. Jerry West, if if he has a better supporting cast, maybe he would have won more championship than Bill Russell back in the 60s. But West comes in at 14. And the 15th pick is really the hardest because that's where it really gets stuck who I should pick out of every other 60-ish players. But I'm going with a two-time champion in the modern era that I think can play both new and old rules. He stepped right in the middle of time, I think. And he's a guy that can defend new rules game. He can step out and defend small guys, and he can block your shot anytime. And I mentioned already that I want to draft centers ASAP because I think I need centers to compete against the Wilts, the Kareem, the Shaq. Team 15 is going with Hakeem Olajuwon. Two-time champion, two times finals MVP. He's dominant not just in those 2 years and those two playoff run, but all along, Hakeem has so much skill in him. And by the mere fact that he capitalized his career by winning the two championship when Michael was kind of semi-retired, those were solidifying his case that he's above the one-time champions, the Paul Pierce, the Kevin Garnett's, the Dirk Nowitzki, because Hakeem wins two champs without a legit star. I mean, Clyde Drexler's top 75 player, but when he joined Houston, he was on his downturn, and Hakeem was still at the peak of his power. So that rounds up round one of this ultimate fantasy bracket. This video series is gonna be kind of a little crazy. We're gonna draft 5 rounds of these players, and it gets more and more difficult. And we gets to starting to pair up guys in round two. Imagine you are the GM. Imagine you have Kobe, which one of these remaining 60 players you're drafting. Imagine you have LeBron. Who else you're drafting? Um, if you're Michael, you draft Scotty just to make sure that you've got a proven concept to win championships. So stay tuned for the next video. We're gonna go to round 2 of the draft of this NBA 75 Ultimate Fantasy Bracket. If you like this video, press like, make a comment whether you like this 15 players drafted and do you like their order, what type of changes or moves if you are one of those GMs. um, Subscribe this channel. We're going to produce English content, we're going to produce Hong Kong Chinese content here as well. We're going to focus on this NBA 75 series, but also back in the quote unquote reality. We're going to talk a lot more about this season. 2021-2022 NBA season has started. A lot of good games, bangers, a lot of headlines. Stay tuned and subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much.